Hey everybody, it's Mrs. Bianchi. We're looking at question number 9, which is a little tricky because there are several statements that you have to look at and you have to decide if the statement is true or if the statement is false and mark it accordingly. It says the polygon represents the floor of a library. So one of the things that I just want to point out to you, that's a strategy here. If we were to find the area of this red rectangle and we ask ourselves, what would the dimensions of that be? It would be a 45 by 37, right? We would go ahead and we would do base times height, and we would multiply together these two numbers as the base and the height. So we would call 45 the base, and because this is perpendicular, we would call that the height. And that would give us the area of the red rectangle. Now, keep in mind that we also have this little triangle, which I call a cutout. And we have the information to get the area of that, right? We would look for the numbers that are perpendicular to each other. That's these two numbers. And we have those numbers. So the formula for area of a triangle, recall, is half of the base times the height. And we would use these two numbers as the base and the height because they're perpendicular. That's a right angle right there. So we could do half times, and this number here is 25, and the number that's perpendicular to it is 25, so we could call that the height. So we'll call this the base and this the height. Now, a strategy that we could use if we were interested in finding the area of this thing would be to take the number that we have here. So you'll have some number, you'll have some number here. By multiplying these two numbers together, you'll finish this computation. I think if it were me doing this, I would go ahead and do 25 times 25. Since we don't have an even number to take half of, find the product of these two numbers and then take half of that by dividing it by 2 on your calculator. Or you can just set up the algorithm and divide it by 2, and you'll have whatever number that is. And you can subtract this green number from the red number, and that'll be the area of the polygon. Now, if you look at the other questions, one of the things that they're asking, is there another way that you might be able to figure out the area of this region? So let's move this out of the way, and let's move this out of the way. Is there any other way that we might break this thing up? So let's just take a peek and see if could we break it up and figure it out by figuring out the area of this. Do we have the information to do that? We could multiply 37 times 20 and get the area of that purple rectangle. Could we get the area of this rectangle? We could. We wouldn't be multiplying 12 times 45 because remember 45 is the length of this whole thing. So we would have to infer the length of this line right here. And how would we do that? We would know that if this is 20, that this is 20. And remember 20 plus some number would have to equal 45. So you would have to calculate that to figure that out. You could do it, but it would be a little bit tricky. And then you could go ahead and find the area of the triangle that we already, well, actually, let's look at it this way. We could find, let me use blue. We could find the area of this triangle, but we'd also have to make some inferences. So once we get the length of that yellow line, that's going to be the same thing as this. And we can infer this because we know that if this is 12 right here, that this is 12, and 12 plus some number, this piece, right, would have to equal 37. So you could subtract 12 from 37 and get that number. But do you see how complicated that is? That's very complicated. But if we look at the answer choices there, let's look at some of the choices that are present for, it does say, one way to find the area of the floor is to find the area of the 45 by 37 foot rectangle and then subtract the area of the missing triangle. And then they talk about to find the area of the floor, the length of the unlabeled diagonal side length of the polygon must be determined. Ask yourself if that's true or false. So go through these and read them very carefully and consider going back and playing this video a second time. So just take a look at this one more time. If it were me doing this, I don't think I would go for this approach. I would go for the approach that I showed you first, which is find the area of this red rectangle, find the area of this, and subtract it out. But some exceptional math students usually like to try more than one way to make sure that they get the same answer, because you should. If you use multiple strategies, you should end up getting the same number. But do read it carefully. All right, good luck finishing that up.